Welcome everybody to the live stream about Junie and Agent Wars. And today with me I have Ken again. So we continue doing Agent Wars, and Ken wanted to show in the beginning what was the result of the previous live stream because we didn't finish it quite yet.
I'll start if you want, just to say who I am or what I'm doing here. Although I guess what
Yeah.
I'm doing here is you. Uh, my name's Ken Cousin. It's cousin like the relative, even though it doesn't look like it. We think it's an Ellis Island job or something. I play two roles these days. One is I'm a one-person company called Cousin IT, although my wife calls it Cousin It, like the Addams Family was her idea. And I do primarily do training courses and development and writing books and speaking at conferences and things like that. I've been doing that for about 20 years or so. I also, in the last year, I took a quote retirement job where I'm now a professor of computer science at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. So I'm based in Connecticut, which, if you're not from the U.S., is in the New England. It's the northeast of the United States. So I'm on Eastern Daylight Time. I see we got people from France and the UK. Wonderful. I have been working with this AI stuff for a while. Mostly, I teach a lot of training classes, especially on the O'Reilly Learning Platform with all this stuff. And of course, I'm very interested in Junie. I've been working with JetBrains as a tool for many years. I think I switched over officially in my mind around 2010, I think, when the support came out for Android applications, when they decided to go with Android Studio and it was all based on the same root. That was when I finally went, okay, all my friends are telling me to switch over. It's time. And went up the learning curve on all that. So I really like it. I'm a training partner to some degree. And I'm really glad to be here, even though I do want to put in the disclaimer that while I'll be using Claude Code and talking about it a lot, I have no specific affiliation with any of the AI companies, certainly not Anthropic. I will try to represent the tool to the best of my ability, but don't take anything I say as official. Go to the documentation, play with it yourself, see what you think.
All right. Let's do a little recap from the previous episode that we did. So we tried comparing Junie and Cloud Code the last time, but we kind of messed it up with the same directory tree. Anyways, so we're gonna try to repeat that, but in isolation. So Ken will be running his agent on his machine, and I will be running Junie on my machine. We will start with the same requirements and proceed, and we will see where do we get, like, will we be able to implement it completely or not. We gotta be restrictive on that. But Ken, you wanted to show where did you get from with the last time episode, like
Yeah,
what was the final
that
results?
yes, thank you. That exercise, that live stream it's more successful than that made it sound. I think we had a good time, and we didn't actually conflict. One of the commentators, one of the people attending, mentioned we should use Git work trees, and I'd heard of those, and in the meantime I did look into that, and they're of course absolutely right. We probably should have done it that way, but we didn't wind up conflicting anyway. So what we did is I wound up cleaning it up as soon as we were done and finishing up what we were trying to do. The basic idea there is I have this thing called a certificate service. Let me magnify that a little bit, which I have deployed on Heroku, even though it's got a URL associated with my website. It's certificate-service.cousinit.com. And the idea is that I can give you a certificate or as a signature of one of my ebook, one of my books, and I could put in a name like, let me put yours in here, Anton. Oh, and I pick one of my books that you're interested in, Makito, right? That work for you?
Yeah, let's
Sure,
try
why
that.
not?
Why
And
not?
I click generate a certificate, and it should create a PDF here, which if I open up, looks like this. So it says certificate of ownership. This certifies that Anton Aripov is a proud owner of Makito Made Clear and has earned the author's eternal gratitude. And see, it's got this is a self-signed certificate signed with my own self-signed certificate. See, this QR code would lead to a place where you could validate that my self-signed certificate was valid. So that was the gag. And this is better than, this is my approximation of signing an ebook. Now, what we wanted to do in the live stream last time is load this project into both Claude Code and Junie and say, what do you recommend we do with this? And one of the suggestions from the agent was could use an analytics dashboard. And I'm just going to show you the result of that. This is let me make that a little smaller here. This is the resulting analytics dashboard, which we didn't quite complete during the time required last time. But as soon as we were done, it took me 10 minutes to clean it up, switch to Postgres as the database, and deploy it to Heroku. Let me refresh this to make sure it's got the certificates there. So this was all created with Claude Code primarily. Junie did some too, but we didn't use that branch at the time. I picked the branch I was working on, and you see it's got a total and how many today in a week, and shows which books have had certificates created, and there are the activities that the people who have made certificates, and performance metrics and system info. So I mean, it all worked, and it only took me a few minutes after we were done to get this finished. But I was afraid we left the people with the impression that it didn't work out, and it did. Now the problem, and by the way, when I hit certificates, it shows the JSON data to reference these certificates and where they're being stored and everything. It's just that it wasn't the competitive aspect of it that we were looking for in the previous stream. And by the way, you're welcome to take a look at this. This is not hidden in any way. It's the same URL /admin/dashboard. So let me paste that into the chat as a comment. And if you just delete the admin dashboard part, you get to the original certificate service if you like. So I just wanted to finish that. And if you want, Anton, I could always email you the PDF there if you like.
I can probably try generating one for myself.
Or you could generate it yourself. Yeah. So at any rate, that was just to tie up the loose ends and since people will be wandering into our live stream, I thought I'd just say, yes, we did in fact finish that and it did work. But this time we'd much rather do something that is more of a comparison, a direct comparison of the two products. Now, let me tell you what app we're going to work on, but let me let you talk for a minute because I'm not good at that.
All right. So your idea was to work with LLMs and MCPs and all this new fancy stuff, right? So
yeah, let me phrase it this way. Did you want to introduce yourself at all or say anything about JetBrains or anything?
No, I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
Okay, then that's fine. I wanted to make sure I don't step on you in that case because that's what I felt like I did last time. Is I get over enthusiastic and I sometimes don't give people enough time to cut in. Although I see we got somebody from Trinidad and Tobago. That is so cool. At any rate. The idea this time, of course, is MCP, Model Context Protocol is very hot right now. And I was trying to understand why. Why does everybody care so much? Because as a Java developer, I use two frameworks a lot. I use LangChain for J and I use Spring AI. And both of those make it very easy to do what's called tool calling, where you could write your own methods and have the AI call those methods whenever it deems it appropriate. And that's kind of what MCP does anyway. So I'm like, why would we care about that? Why would we care about MCP just because they have a standard? And people would say, well, there's all these MCP servers out there that you could use. And I thought, all right, well, that's kind of interesting. And then what happened to me is I saw this blog post, which I have here. This is by a woman named Daniela Petruzalek. I don't really know. Maybe you would know how to pronounce it better.
Looks legit to me.
Looks what to you?
Sounds legit to me, like Petruzalek.
Okay, so close enough. At any rate, she says the title says she's a developer relations engineer at Google. And what she did is she said, you see the title, How I Turned My Computer into the USS Enterprise Using Agents. And what she did basically, and I'll show the idea here, is that she wrapped a tool on her machine called, where is it? Called OS Query. Yeah. Okay. And of course she did everything in Python, and I had never heard of OS Query myself. Here's the web page for it. But this is a free tool that's been around for a while. And I think these pages have been updated in several years. But what it does is it computes analytical information about what's going on your machine. Like it can tell you the number of processes running and the memory being used and network connections and all kinds of things like that. So what she did is she wrapped all that in an agent using Python, using an agent tool, and exposed that. And that meant that she could do, let me skip down past the function calls. She could say something like, computer, do a level 1 diagnostic on the computer, and it would compute all that information using the underlying SQLite database that OS Query compiles to get the machine. So it was all about the prompts and everything and dealing with the tables there. Because what you find out quickly, if you look at this OS Query tool, is that the way you interact with it is through SQL queries. See, so this is a select distinct and all of that. And if you want to do SQL queries, you need to know the tables, you need to know the columns, you need to know what flavor of SQL, any quirks they happen to be using there. And that's kind of more trouble than I wanted to go to. So what I have done is I've kind of imitated what she did. I took this tool and I installed it on my Mac, and then I created a project here. Let me close all these files that I called OS Query MCP Server. And here's the GitHub repository, by the way, in case you want to see it. And this wraps that tool in an MCP server. And let me paste in the link.
I just pasted
in the as a comment, unless you want somewhere else. Okay. And the idea is that if I use a regular client, like right here, I've got Claude Desktop rather. I have Claude Desktop. And in Claude Desktop, you can attach tools that are in MCP form. And you can see one of them I have right here is my OS Query server. And it's got all these methods available inside it: get network connections, get temperature info, execute query. And therefore I could say something inside of Claude Desktop like, tell me my system information. And it should automatically use the tool to go ahead and interrogate that. Oh, now I see it. This is what sometimes happens. It didn't recognize that the tool was available. So I'll just say again, tell me using the OS Query MCP server, just to be clear about that. And then it'll go, oh yeah, I got one. Oh, I see it. So there. Now what it's doing is it's getting the system health summary. That's one of the methods I exposed through the MCP service. And then it's at that is a top level query that will trigger 3 other queries to get like networking and processes and memory. And then it will generate the information here. And you can go on and see all the information in a nice format. So bottom line is this: what MCP proved to be useful for me is it let me put a nice simple interface on a rather complex tool, and I didn't have to learn all their SQL tables and everything. All I have to do is ask the AI a question, and it will use the tool and condense the information into whatever we need and present it all like this.
I would clarify that it might use the tool.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you can always, if it doesn't use it, then you say, hey, use the tool, Yeah, I mean, they're definitely, it's not, again, I don't want to imply this is perfect, but it's so much better than having to learn the SQL and having to query it deliberately and all of that. Now, another thing I did once I figured this out, another thing I did that was similar is, like, if you look at the list of MCP servers online, there's tons of them. And GitHub, of course, has a an official one. GitHub has their own official MCP server, but if you look at it, like I could bring it up here in MCP servers, the official one right here, then the way you're supposed to use it, if I go down to the block of JSON data, is that, oh, that's not what they did. Usage and other hosts, local. Here is that they ran it through Docker. So this was the block of code you added inside your Claude desktop config file. Is you said run a Docker command with the following arguments and generate a personal access token and add all that in, and then that will give your client, Claude desktop, access to GitHub. And I did this, but the problem is Docker can be a real resource hog. You know, it really can use up a lot of memory and everything, especially if you're also running a database or something like that. So since I saw how easy enough it was to create an MCP wrapper for OS Query, I did the same thing for the local GH tool on my command prompt. And now I have that, and I don't have to put my personal access token inside this file. I used it to authenticate GH from the command line. And now I can ask a question like, where did I put that? Here. I could also say, use my GH tool. Well, I'll just say use my GitHub MCP service to tell me
the branch information.
The what? Pardon
me? Last 5 commits.
Yeah, commits on the OS query MCP service. Although I don't think I did. What did I call it? A server. I called it server. I mean, it would probably figure it out. Yeah. But now I have something that doesn't use Docker, that'll just use GH and go and find out. Found the repository, and now it's running the query. You know, and this to me kind of brought home what MCP was really for. It was very useful here for me. And it's saying I need to use a git log. Wow. So it found it, but it didn't do what I told it to do. But okay, we get the idea. Okay. Sound good?
Perfect.
All right.
To me, the MCP servers have 2 tasks, like 2 scenarios where they are useful, either for automation, this is what you were doing right now, or stuffing the prompt, so that some tools can go for the extra information somewhere to the service, to documentation, everywhere, and can fetch some additional information that is up to date compared to the training data cutoff for the models. For instance, one of the most useful MCP servers I have recently found is Context 7.
Which one?
Context 7.
Huh. These are all the ones I currently have set up inside of Claude Desktop. Like I use Tavily as a search tool.
Right, that's a search one, but Context 7 is the directory for documentation, index documentation. So like people are just adding some documentation links there. The service indexes the documentation specific to the framework. And then you see the difference is that the search might be finding something very random, or like depending on the ranges. And if you need a specific version of the documentation, then it will be very precise. This is something I see. Like both tools are good, but like they have the different, different value slightly.
Yeah. So, at any rate, here is the code for the MCP server, and Spring AI and LangChain4j both went to 1.0 within the last month. But Spring AI has an extensive discussion of how to create an MCP service. So I have that in here, and what I thought we could do to compare, our agent tools is to make a client for this. Now, this gets a little in depth. I mean, I've got, first of all, just to check that it's available. And by the way, I'm using Java 21, so I could even do like virtual threads or what have you. And you see, I have various tools in here that represent the methods that show up as part of the MCP service. So list the tables or get the table schemas, and they all have a description and then some kind of SQL that is being invoked. And in fact, when I execute the queries, I close this up because I didn't want to make it too complicated. But inside here, what it's doing under the hood is it's using a Java process builder and just running the OS query tool with the JSON code at the command line and then collecting the results. And now all of this is there's error checking and validation and things like that going on. So it looks more complicated than it is, but it's really basically starting up a process and passing in the query and executing it.
Mm-hmm. And all you have is just two files. One is the application to start, and
Which
the
is
other
the one.
one,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So
yeah.
this method, this is a bean that takes the service and gives us what they in Spring AI they call the tool callback provider. And then this is the one with all the at tool annotations to describe what to do, with all the custom
Mm-hmm.
commands and everything. And then in the application.properties file, I have to give it an identification, say that at the moment I have it synchronous rather than asynchronous. I'm using the standard IO transport. I'm not doing HTTP or anything like that. Just because it's all running on my local machine, you have to turn the banner mode off and turn the logging off, apparently. I mean, that's a Spring AI requirement. And that's it. And the rest of this is just tests. So I have a bunch of tests. Well, that one obviously is nothing, but this one has tests for everything. And I use Claude Code to help me generate decent test coverage and to check that all the SQL statements were reasonable and, just to help me develop the whole thing as we went along.
Okay, let's decide how do we build it. Like, what kind of requirements do we have for building this client?
Well, I think if we're going to do that, I should probably ask the tool, right? I mean, do you want to ask Junie, and should I do this
Um,
in Claude Code? And now I did
okay,
what you did. By the way, I
let's.
did what you go ahead. I added a client folder, like you said, and made it part of the overall Gradle build.
Okay, so let me let me do the same. I removed it actually, but I can
Oh,
do it very
sorry.
fast. So it's there. Let me switch to my screen now. So
Mhm.
how do we prompt it? So basically, I have one sentence right now telling that we are going to build a client application to process the natural queries. Should use the MCP client with stdio transport to communicate, and that should kind of do it. It's very vague, like not much of technical details, but let's see.
Oh,
Save the suggested development plan to docs.plan.md. Let's see what Junie suggests. You can start running the same query, and we'll see the difference from your side.
did you say to use the client folder?
No, I didn't.
Should we add that, or you're already running?
I'm already running.
I'm
I
going to add a statement to say all development will be done in the client subproject.
That makes sense. Like if Junie doesn't figure that automatically, I will just do a follow-up prompt and check this out. This is what Junie just came up with: the high-level diagram of components, CLI interface, query processor, MCP client, MCP server. Nice. Components description, the CLI interface and query processor and MCP client. That's good. It has figured, it's going to use Peacock CLI.
That's not a bad
Interesting.
idea.
Not a bad idea. Well, maybe it's a little bit of an overkill, but let's see. Let's see. MCP client implementation, query processing, user experience enhancements, testing and documentation, technology stack, development timeline. It suggests that we can do it in 6 weeks. Uh, Milestones, usage examples. Well,
Maybe we
Um,
should have told it we have 2 hours.
yeah. Okay, well, it looks good, but to me, it's not really a execution plan yet. So
Uh-huh.
what I normally do when I have this plan is I would go to these examples here because the team prepared some example prompts that I suggested. And there is a prompt to create a list of tasks to improve the project. I will refine this prompt a little bit in the same chat. So I will go back to the chat where I just generated the plan.md and paste the query again. So analyze the code base. Instead of analyzing the code base, I will ask it to analyze the the suggested development plan in docs.plan / plan.md file and create a detailed list of actionable technical tasks and save it as an enumerated checklist to the tasks file. Each item should start with a placeholder and should be checked off when completed, and ensure that the tasks are logically ordered. And what else I will do? I will ask Junie. Normally, I would ask Junie itself to generate the guidelines with the instructions how to manage the tasks that I have, but I have already one created. So it basically would state what is the task status, how it should be marked after the execution when it's completed, and so on. Not too many instructions. Like usually, I try to keep it short. It's basically the guidelines how to work with the task list. So
Okay,
let
should
me,
I? Oh, go ahead. Let me know when you want me to show you mine.
yeah, right.
So I gave it the same query you did, and it created these to-dos and read all the code. And then down here at the bottom, it said, okay, I wrote out a file called doc/plan.md, and here is that file in mine. Let me make this smaller, and we could see to create a user-friendly CLI, and it's suggesting Pico CLI or Spring Shell, which I've never used. JSON processing, client handler, natural language, CLI interface. And it's suggesting basic week 1. Yeah, we're going to have to tell it some restrictions on the time frame. Core MCP implementation, those dependencies, the Spring ones clearly, Jackson's already in there, JUnit's already in there, the MCP is in there, but not as a client. And Pico CLI I'd have to add. Secondly, there's the implementation idea, response formatting, advanced features, testing strategy, development guidelines, usage scenario. Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So there's my plans.cli or plans.md, plan.md. Should we tell it to ask it what can be done within the next hour, say?
Oh, that's an interesting take. Let's try.
Yeah, we could ask it and basically say something like, what MVP, see if we can get a minimum viable product out of this, can be done in the next hour.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, you're running on Claude Sonnet 4.0, right?
Well, yes and no. I should have shown you. It's running right now, but I'm on the when you do the /model command inside of this, it would say two things. It would say give me the options, and there's Sonnet, there's Opus, and then there's this combination where it starts with Opus until you use up like 20% of your quota, and then switches to Sonnet. And I think that's the one I'm on now because I didn't change it from before. And so as soon as it comes up with this, I think it's going to do that. Here's again the problem that we talked about last time. These things tend to get enthusiastic and just plunge ahead and start developing. even when you don't want it to. I can stop it anytime I want just by hitting escape.
Mm-hmm. All right. Oh,
So
let it do the work, I
yeah, I'll
think.
let it crank away. If you want to
Yeah.
go ahead and show what you got now.
So let me switch to my stage. So what I've got after generating the tasks list, I got this very detailed phased task list, like grouped into phases with the checkboxes, or like where the agent will uncheck whatever is done, right, step by step. Sometimes what I have seen that it can implement, let's say, a few sections and then decide that something is optional or too advanced and skip to the next phase. We'll see how it works out. I told it now after the generating, while you were talking, I asked it to start the development with like this thing. Proceed developing the client application. Start with phase one, project setup and basic CLI. So it's gonna bootstrap and the module, generate the Gradle dependencies. We'll see if it does it correctly just in a moment. So yeah, it already added the client module. So it was added before, and it generated a bunch of configurations and dependency lines here. Like I can see Pico CLI, JLine. I honestly don't know what JLine is. Haven't used it ever. I can see that it's Spring AI starter MCP client dependency. It's good that it didn't roll back 1.0 version of Spring AI, because Junie doesn't have MCP integrations and doesn't actually search the web. So the model that runs in the background is Claude 3, Sonnet 3.7, and it doesn't know about 1.0 at all. So it's interesting how it's handled, like inside the agent. Apparently, the workflow might be configured so that at least I know one instruction from the system prompt is that it's instructed to do minimal changes, and maybe it just this instruction just enforces not to roll back the dependencies that might be newer than the models know about. But let's see, like it's currently running.
Okay, well, I have something to show you if you're ready. Let me show you that model command. So this model command says set the AI model for Claude code, and the default is what's recommended, and that's not readable on my dark background, but it says Opus 4 for up to 20% of the usage limits, then use Sonnet, and that's what's checked. But I could also just say Opus for complex tasks reaches usage limits 5 times faster, or Sonnet for 4 for daily use. Of course, I've already got that set, so that's what's on there. This is the README, so it generated a README in the client folder, a minimal CLI client that communicates with the OS query MCP server to answer natural language questions. And here's the quick start. So boot jar and CD to the client and do the build in the client and run it with --args. It's what's using my CPU, for example. And you could run it in interactive mode. And here's an example session with all of that and some limitations. And it says see plan.md for the full development roadmap. But if I go ahead and let me get this out of the way, look at the code here.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't this interesting? A lot of command which comes from Pico CLI. So let me look at the Gradle build file. And they're using, isn't that funny? It's using the Kotlin one, Kotlin DSL, probably because I did that in the top level project as well. Yeah. So there's the dependencies. There's Jackson data bind. Again, that's part of the overall project. Pico CLI, SLF4J, JUnit, Jupyter, and put in the application plugin, which, by the way, I'm sure Cedric will know this, that you don't need to put in both Java and application. Application implies the Java plugin, but doesn't hurt anything to have them both listed. And using JUnit platform and system.in and everything. So that looks pretty solid. And here's the simple client. I suppose I should try to run it, shouldn't I? Did it put
Let's
in?
try.
Let me look at the tests here. Okay, so generic test, that's nothing. And then this one, simple query to get the OS query version and list query tables. So that's all using this OS query service, which is
wait.
that is the one that's in the parent. No. That's
okay. You're in the
I went to
parent
the wrong
project.
one.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I went to the wrong one. I apologize. Oh wow, it didn't give me any tests. That's bad. I should have told it to give it tests. I don't like it when it doesn't give me any tests. At any rate, what's the mechanism to try it out? So it says go to the client and say Gradle W run -- arg. So let me just copy. Oh, it wants me to use the parent Gradle. Yeah, I guess why not? Okay, copy, and then let me, now, by the way, with Claude Code, if I exit and then start it up again, I use the -C or -- continue command to continue the current conversation. So I'll go ahead and exit and then paste that command in here. And oh, I was supposed to change directory down to client before I did that. Okay. And I got it. Good. I got an error. So there we go. Oh, that pattern. No. This is not an error. That error is, I believe that's because in order to make an MCP server using Spring AI, you have to set the console logging to an empty string, and that tends to throw it off. So I don't know if that's the real problem or not, but now it's time to go back and tell Claude that it's having an issue with that. So let me go back up. I tried to run the sample in the README, but it failed. And I'll be real vague about it, and then I can get more detailed as we go. Something I can do, I can also paste in screenshots of errors or other problems like that, and let it see what it's doing here.
I see. Meanwhile, I will switch back to my
Right.
screen and show what is happening. So the first phase was, an easy setup of the project, and then I asked it to proceed with MCP Client Implementation. So it's gonna use Spring AI MCP Client, configure stdio transport, yada yada, and it's working currently. So generating some code, changing the properties. It's kind of slowish, and does a lot of code generation. And what I have here already is this sub project, the same way as you do have in this parent project, like this client included sub project, and then the application itself is this Spring Boot application. It has a command line runner with interactive, I don't know, is it mode or shell? Yeah, shell. And then we have a service. A lot of code, actually. Yeah. Get network connection. I wonder. Okay, execute the tool, right? So it's probably some sort of a callback. Let's see. Yeah, MCP client service. A mock MCP client. That's interesting. OS query command. I hope it's not using the one from the parent project. Yes, it's from the same project. Okay. So we have a bunch of things already implemented, but the process is still ongoing. We'll see. Oh, now it's finished, and as you can see, it updated the task list. Just a second, I will open that. Where is it? Yeah, right here. So, did it? No. I thought it did. 1 second. Okay, so it updated. It integrated the voice query MCP server already. How is that possible? Too fast, I mean. It didn't create the test suite for the server at least the task is not unchecked. We can check quickly if the tests are empty, so it's fair. I would rather do manual testing this time and ask it to proceed with query processing implementation, but probably it's important to visualize a little bit what is happening and what we are actually generating.
Right.
So I have this whiteboard sketchboard. Let me do this. So what we have is this. We have an MCP server, right? MCP, the one that can create it. So it's going to run on our machine. We have our CLI application, which is a client application, the CLI. What is happening is when the user is like enters a query, like query. Yeah, I'm getting better in writing this thing. Actually, the CLI application should first go into the LLM somewhere in the cloud, maybe OpenAI or Anthropic or anything else, might be a local LLM as well. And the query or the request, the prompt that is sent to the LLM contains the prompt itself, like the command, like tell me about my environment, or what are the most consuming memory consuming applications on my machine. And along with the prompt, we have two descriptions, and that two description list contains the MCP server we just created, or not created, but the one that we have already, right? And the LLM is supposed to return a request, which will be a tool call.
Right.
Let's do like tool call, yeah. And then our CLI application is supposed to call one of the functions that are provided by the MCP server, and then we get a result. This is what we like. Ultimately, this is what we want to get.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, all right. So I'm going to execute the third phase, and I can switch back to you. The way I do it is proceed with tasks for phase 3 query processing. What is happening on your side?
I'm trying to deal with that issue regarding the empty response, and I told Claude that that's what I thought was going on. And the problem, it says, is that the server's not returning anything at the moment. And now it's trying to debug that, which I don't know why the server wouldn't be returning anything. And oh, by the way, one of the things that you have is you're in Brave mode. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. In Claude Code, you don't technically have a Brave mode. You get this prompt each time when it wants to run some command, and it says, do you want to proceed? Yes means once. Yes, and don't ask again. 4 would be fine. I'll say yes in this case. And then eventually what I can do is I can use the / permissions command to see what I have agreed to, what commands it's allowed to run without asking for permission. And there's ways to configure that to have a list of everything if you want. So this is what I was trying to tell it, that empty logging pattern error is expected. It's not really a problem. So hopefully it's going to figure that out now. And what it did is it generated, let me close these things again. It generated another client, this direct client, which looks like it was going to work with a process builder which is not really what I wanted to do. That's going to call OS query directly. And that's not at all what I had in mind. So I got to tell it, no, don't do that. But let's see. This is trying to say, oh, but this works. See, I can go ahead and call OS query directly. Remember, the plan was to work with the MCP server, not to call OS query directly. Please keep, maybe what I should do now is I should generate the Claude.md file, which is the file that Claude uses to keep track of notes, information it needs whenever it's going to do the next query or the next change. And then that is what it reads when you restart Claude, when you leave and you come back the next day or something like that. I always remind myself, oh yeah, before I commit or before I leave, to update both the README and the Claude.md file. And of course, now it's going, yeah, there's issues and we're not getting a response and all that. So it's running at the moment. And when it settles on something, I'll let you know. What I really want to ask it to do, though, is to add test cases, because I mean, I don't always do TDD. I do something. Did I ever tell you this one? I do GDD instead of TDD. I mean,
GDD is
it's guilt-driven development. It's like if I write a bunch of code that's not tested, I feel guilty, and then I write tests. So, but so at any rate, I need to emphasize to it that we need, the test cases in there to prove that the code is okay. I think this is going to be one of the big issues, because obviously what we're going to be doing is dealing with a lot of agent-generated code, and therefore, how do you determine whether that code is right or wrong? I like to say, this is going to make testing is going to have a much higher priority than it used to, and it used to be important anyway. But we need to have tests. I in fact like what do they call property-based testing with JQuick is really nice at determining where the boundaries are of where the code works and where it doesn't, things like that. I like that too.
Yeah, it's a nice tool. In the development plan that was generated initially, in phase 5, it has a whole section of for testing, about testing for me. Let me switch to my screen. So there is the testing and documentation. I wonder, because it's generated by the LLM, and I wonder if it's just a standard way to respond to this development plan query, that the testing is like an afterthought. Maybe if my query initially was to build the development plan with test-driven development scenario in mind, then maybe it would be slightly different. Meanwhile, I have a lot of agent-generated code already. Let me open up just for a second. The query execution service is 365 lines. So if I open that, there is a lot. There is a lot. I see some tooling calls, of course, but I'm not sure yet if it's gonna use the MCP server. I do have MCP client, right? The other thing that I just noticed in the, where was it? Just a second, which I actually liked. Just a second. Yeah, here, MCP client. You see the configuration options, like with the default values, and it's interesting that it has discovered the jar file that I have built for the MCP server already, and the default path to that one is correct, funnily enough. And well, I can reconfigure that, of course. A good ability of IntelliJ to discover those properties and see if everything is covered in your application. If those properties are like pointing to the correct injected values, that's a good thing to have. What else? Let's see if it's running. If it's still running. Okay, so it's seemingly completed phase 3 already.
Wow, good.
And the task list, okay. So, like technically, I should have an MVP or something working on my side. I am not sure. I'm pretty sure it will not actually do the thing that we expected, but I can try running it. Let's see. Most likely it will just crash because, well, at least it shouldn't know my API key for OpenAI. It's not configured anywhere.
Is it an environment variable, or you didn't add
Yes,
one at all?
it's an environment variable, but I didn't tell it. Like, see, it's shutting down the restarting the MCP server and shutting down in the loop. Nothing is happening. There is an error. Let's see. The MCP client, the server process is not running, so I should start it.
Well, here's the thing about that. I think this is part of the problem here is when you configure Claude Desktop to run with a client, then you give it the command and the arguments, and the command for something like this, the command is Java, the arguments are -jar, and then the path to the generated jar file, so that it's able to start the server automatically. And if you try to start a Spring AI MCP service without doing that, I tend to get these errors having to do with the empty pattern and all that kind of stuff, because it's not really it's not a web app. It's not designed to be run separately. It's designed to be accessed through a client somehow. And
Right.
I'm taking a few moments to try to explain that to Claude, that this is not what you're supposed to be running. And I actually wound up with a bit of I interrupted it in the middle and it kind of crashed and I had to restart it. So it's working on that now for the moment.
Right, but the way I see it, like the init method that is going to start the MCP server.
Oh, good. Okay.
Well, it's supposed to start. Maybe the path is incorrect, or maybe something is failing, but it just goes into the loop.
If
Right.
this turns out to be a problem with the way we're doing it, then we can just pick a public MCP service and see if we can generate a client for that, just to demonstrate the process. I mean, I'm sure this is all resolvable, but the question is, how much do we want to resolve in front of everybody as opposed to,
People like to see us struggling anyway, so.
well, yeah, I hope so, but eventually,
Okay, let me try it once again. But what was the issue there? So starting. What if I give it the absolute path instead? So I have this build libs folder and just copy the reference, the
I
absolute
think
path.
mine just figured out that it's not using the HTTP protocol. It's sending the JSON data directly over standard IO, which, I mean, that's what standard IO means on MCP, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it just realized that, oh, I can do it that way. It's like,
Okay, one of the ways to overcome this when something doesn't start in the middle of the task list or something doesn't work is actually try to enforce like some correct state, because we are not I'm not proceeding with the task list until the end, because you might spend like 2 hours or 3 hours, a lot of tokens, a lot of credits generating the application by the task list, which will be fine, like at the end will not be functional at all. So I think it's a good idea to, when you finish some reasonable number of tasks, like let's say 2 phases of development, setting up the project and then generating some functionality. Ideally, I would have tests as well. Then actually check if the application can run and do at least the minimal stuff in there.
yeah.
But since it doesn't do stuff, I would do the wipe coding way, like give it the exception and give the instruction that the application doesn't seem to function properly. The connection to the MCP server fails with the following exception. Actually, I didn't have to tell it to fix it or anything. Like, it probably will figure that out itself.
Is that standard error is used for info messages. So even when there's no errors here, there is some command timing out. I don't know what it is, but it does say starting the server from, and it works. The server appears to be ready, initializes a connection, sending the initialized request. Here's the request being sent, waiting for a response, and it supposedly got it back. And it says it's working, and then it tried another one, and there's some hang going on. There's some timeout. Now, as I recall, with Claude Desktop, when you're adding a tool to that, what it actually does is it starts up the service during the Claude Desktop startup process so that it's not continually restarting the jar file every single time. I think it just starts it once and has it available somehow internally. And we're not doing any of that. It's like every time we send a command, we're restarting from scratch. So I don't know if that's having anything to do with the performance either, but that's just something I thought I'd mention. See how it's adding an executor service and with the client and properly shut down the executor and all of this. And I don't know how much of that is required or not, but I think that may be part of the issue we're running into. I don't remember seeing that in any of the client documentation on how to do an MCP client, for example. LangChain for J has some extensive documentation on how to make a client. They don't have much of anything on how to make a service, which I was kind of surprised by. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't know.
Meanwhile, the process of fixing the process of startup actually succeeded.
Oh, good.
But well, succeeded in a way that my application starts and I apparently have a shell to type my query into.
Oh, good.
List. But of course, it was expected that it will fail on the next step or processing this query because well, I expected it to fail in slightly different way. It seems that it's failing on parsing the JSON. For whatever reason, I need to check further. But I was expecting it to fail with because it cannot, like, where does it go? Like, where's the LLM? Which provider does it use? I haven't instructed it in any way, so I'm going to fix that on the next go.
Glad it's finally doing, and it's creating the tests in JUnit 5 capability. Mine seems to be happy. It's updating the README now. Yeah, here, if you want to, are you on mine or yours?
It's yours right now.
Oh, okay. Sorry. It says I've successfully developed a comprehensive MCP client, but I don't know if that's true or not. Full implementation, extended communication, natural. Oh, look at this ASCII art for the win.
Nice.
Look at that. Client, standard IO, JSON to the MCP server to the OS query service. And there's the command line interface. I am like kind of impressed, even though it didn't fit the font inside there, but that's pretty good. So it says there's the interactive mode, huh? So let me, I'm already in the client folder, I think. So let me copy this. And I bet you it doesn't work the first time, but let's find out. So let's, oh, wait a minute. Before I do this, I think it updated the, please update the Claude file as well as the README. I want to make sure I get all that updated because when I come back in, it's going to read those files right off the bat. And then I'll try out the little interactive test and see if it happens to be working.
Yep. Meanwhile, I will show what I'm doing to fix the issue.
Sure.
So the parsing error, I will feed in this parsing error, and well, it fails. But I will also add another requirement here, that the processing of the query should be done using OpenAI model, and the API key is defined by the OpenAI API key environment variable. And let's see if it
Although,
it
wait a
can
minute, where are
fix.
you using OpenAI?
Why?
Did I actually put OpenAI in there as a dependency? I think maybe I did. Maybe that was just the default.
No, I don't think you have it specified actually, but let's see. What do we have in the dependencies? We have only the MCP client,
Yeah, right. I didn't think I needed that.
but to okay, there's like the process in the way we just sketched it out. I have it like okay, it's gone.
Right.
The
Right.
thing is, when we type in the query, give me like the way we do it in the cloud code, right?
Right.
In the desktop
Client.
application, actually, the client.
Yeah.
So the way we do it here, like list the top CPU consuming applications on my machine.
Right.
So this natural language query actually goes to the LLM first.
Right.
The
So
LLM,
you picked OpenAI as your LLM.
yeah, because I
Okay.
have the API key in my environment, I know that. It
Okay.
can be any other. I've been experimenting with local models as well, like Mistral,
Yeah.
Llama 3.2.
Hmm.
What else? There was some. I actually have them in my terminal right there. Uh, Clear. So let me show that. So I have a Llama. No, I don't have a Llama running. Llama list. Yeah. So Code Shell, Gemma, Quen 2.5 Coder, Quen 3, Mistral, Llama. So different models. I have downloaded them on my machine locally. They take up some space, but they can run on my machine whenever I need them. And what I learned is that the tool calls are not their strongest ability, unfortunately.
The local
So
models.
yeah, for the local models via Llama, I don't. Maybe it's me. I'm just experimenting these days, like with some like local agents, basically processing the queries and executing MCP tools. But so far they weren't the greatest. And if you go to OpenAI and Anthropic models, they just work with tool calls, just much better.
I'm surprised that Mistral doesn't do a great job with that. I would think that one would be good. But yeah, I have noticed that some of the local models, especially the smaller ones, have issues with the tool calls.
Exactly. So yeah,
Yeah.
like maybe it's me. I need to experiment more. I'm not saying that they are not capable of. I was able to get tool calls from the local models, but not consistently. And yeah, that is why I'm going to the service provider models. Um, but let's see if well, it has figured that it needs OpenAI Spring Boot Starter for this. Makes sense. I hate when the models actually change the empty lines. This is something I don't like. I want the content in the lines. Like, why do you
Mm.
spend my tokens on that? Add Open API integration using the OpenAI API key environment variable. That's good. That's good. Let's see if it's added anything. Yeah, we have an API key. For some reason, it doesn't recognize the property yet, but it should. Maybe after it reloads the project. And now it's done. But now the code doesn't compile, it seems. Okay, they are not, the imports are not needed. Sometimes doing the manual work is just fine. Like it still feel control over the code, like in your project. Not everything should be generated by your agent. Okay, so I guess this is fine. Let's see if the project is actually functional, if it even can start. No, it can't. What happened? Spring AI could not find. Okay, maybe need to re-import the project then. Let's see. One of the things it's a half joke, but when the models or the agents will be able to cope with dependencies and Gradle setup, then we are almost AGI. That's just, this is the hardest problem of all of them.
I mean, I did see somebody, post something about, hey, my AI tool fixed my Gradle bug, and people were like, "What? By switching to Maven?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's harsh." That's too strong a criticism. It's funny. It looks like on mine, I'm looking through the results here, and my client's not using an LLM at all. So the test is, basically, if you see mine here, if you want to see it, let me bring up the structure view here. So this is my simple MCP client, and it initializes everything, and it does seem to connect and all of that, but calling the tool is not using an LLM at all right now. It's just sending a tool call request. It's like formulating the JSON data by using JSON node and the Jackson data bind and all of that stuff. And it's funny, yours automatically put in an LLM and mine did not. And in fact, the next step I would have to say is, hey, wait a minute, you don't have to, it's trying to formulate the JSON input for an MCP server by hand, and that kind of misses the whole point of an MCP client.
Right, you can just call the function or just an API, like why?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell it that and see if it can adjust the client for that. But that's where I wound up. So that's why, oh yeah, we're going to get rid of all these developers and replace them with AI tools. Like, I don't know. Okay. So at any rate, you can go on to the next step on yours while I talk to mine here and try to tell it that let's do something differently here.
I think I have hit the wall now.
Oh, okay.
Like I will explain what happened. So after adding the Spring AI starter for OpenAI, basically what is happening when I run the application, the client application, it probably turns into a web application by default. Maybe something within the Spring context initialization, what beans it configures automatically, and the application just fails to start with the description that the web application could not be started as there was no Spring framework boot web reactive web server factory being defined in the context. Well, it's not really the wall. I can still feed this error message to Junie, but I feel like we're already like deviating from the goal, and we are not in control of the tool anymore. We are just supplying or feeding the instructions to do something, and we are not directing the agent to do the work anymore. At least me.
Okay.
In this case, it's me.
Fine. I mean, I'm having the difficulties I'm having right now is that whenever I interrupt it thinking, I'm running into problems and have to exit and restart it, which is really unusual. I'm not sure why that's happening. I mean, I'm getting the API error. But again, if you want, I mean, how long are we going? I guess we have another half hour, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you want let me start mine up and try to see if I could add the LLM and see if it makes a difference or not. But I get your point. I mean, I could tell you a couple things about Claude code, and then you could tell me about the features of Junie as well. And that might be a nice point of comparison between the two tools. Does that work for you?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so on mine, if you want to switch to my screen here for a moment, I restarted Claude again, because again, when I interrupt it, it gets confused. All the commands come with a /. And, oh, that's a new one. Add directory, add a new working directory. That didn't used to be there. Clear gets rid of the whole conversation history. I don't want to use that, but I often use /compact. Eventually, when you have a long conversation, you're going to use up the context window in the LLM, whether it's Sonnet or Opus. I think they both have like 200,000 tokens in the context window. And when you're transmitting the entire code base, the smaller the project, the easier this is. But big projects, it starts to use up that context window pretty quickly, and it will auto compact by default, which means that when it runs out of room, it will take the entire previous conversation and generate a smaller form of that, and then clear the memory and then start with that smaller form. And that's usually pretty effective, but something's always lost in that process. So I often use that compact command when I hit a natural break, when I say, okay, we've committed everything, we've updated all the files and everything. Now's a good time to compact, and then it does it. So, for example, I can't do it. I restarted. I could do it now, but it won't do anything. I restarted Claude, so that didn't happen. But that's a useful command. Cost, of course, for me, it just says, oh, you're on a Claude Max subscription, so you don't get anything out of that. But if I was to log out and log back in again, it gives me the option to use my API key instead. And therefore, you'd have to monitor those costs pretty closely. This IDE one is the one that would say, well, here, let me show you. That's the one that says, hey, you've got the plugin installed in IntelliJ, which I do. So if I selected that, then it would open up the file in IntelliJ on any file it was working with. It would show it in comparison, the get compare mode. It would use the IDE a bit better, but I'm not wild about it. I'd rather work from the command line and then just switch over manually. But I just thought I'd show you that command there. Other commands that are in here. Where's the MCP command? Now, the MCP command, this is, again, something that Junie doesn't have yet. I imagine it's coming sooner or later. But with the MCP command, it tells you which servers are configured already, and I don't have any. And the thing is, you cannot configure an MCP server while Claude is running. If I exit out of it and then say, let's clear the screen here. If I say Claude MCP, then it gives me the commands like add, and there's your name of the server and the URL and everything. But this is the one I use the most, add from Claude Desktop. It'll see what servers have been configured already in the Claude Desktop config file, and it will give you the option to add those. So just to show you what that looks like, add from Claude Desktop. So Claude MCP add from, and now it's saying, well, which ones do you want? Like, I don't need the everything server. And I'm trying to remember, how do I clear it? Enter to confirm, escape. Oh, space. Yeah, let me turn off a couple of these. SQLite, file system. I don't need Heroku right here, or this one, or that one. Okay, so I'll leave in my MCP server. That OS query is the one that's the server that I already configured, so that now if I start, and by the way, that will only affect this particular directory and session. There is a way to do it globally, but now if I say MCP, there's all the MCP servers that are already configured, and therefore I could use this as a, what processes, this is my user interface now, are running on my machine. And it should automatically use that MCP server directly. So yeah, see there it wants to go execute query, which is my command, and there's the SQL. inside it, and I'll say, yeah, just do those and don't bother me about it. And there's the big JSON data response, which I assume it's going to interpret in some way. Yeah, there we go. And there's the output. So in other words, it's able to work with MCP services that I've already gone to the trouble to configure inside of the Claude desktop app. Now the other commands here, there's an install GitHub act, which is really about GitHub Actions. I haven't played with that yet. Then there's this memory one, which says what memory are we working with? Project memory, project memory, local, and user memory. But all of those are just editing Claude.md. So it's really a misleading statement. It's just modifying the like in Junie, that'd be the guidelines file, right? The .guidelines are.
I think memory is slightly a different thing. So guidelines is kind of guiding how something should be done, but the
Right.
memory, something that we don't have. This is the external storage for the state of the process. So
Yeah, well, this one should be, when they say memory, I don't think here they mean memory, but maybe I'm wrong. You see here we've got, there's those permissions with the allow or deny. So these are the ones that I've said yes to, that these are all allowed to run without confirmation. And if I approve things I shouldn't have approved, this is my opportunity to deny them if I need to, to switch between those two. So that's another feature I always have to remember. Get comments from a GitHub pull request. I haven't really played with that. The release notes are always out of date. I think like if I say status, then I'm on version 1.0.24. And you see when I said release notes, it's only up to 22 for some reason. So I don't know why those don't line up, but it does give me some information on all of that. And I think that's all of them, right? Is that everything I wanted to show you there? The terminal setup just to make it easier to do carriage returns and stuff. Upgrade has to do with your account, and there is a Vim mode because Vim will never die, right? Vim is always going to be with us.
Along with the MCP servers, I think there is like an integration for web search, right? So if you enter a query that the agent is able to interpret as something that guides it to search for the information, it will do the web search, directly without calling the MCP servers.
Well, I know that on the actual Claude desktop. Oops, where did I put that?
Yeah,
did it crash? That would be bad. No, here it is. On the actual desktop, then we have these integrations at the top. There's the web search integration and Drive search, Gmail, calendar. I mean, this is really important because Google's Gmail search is terrible, but I don't remember seeing a web search explicitly inside of Claude Code. On the other hand, one of the MCP servers that I've added is that Tavily one, which lets me do two things. Tavily has two methods, one to search and one to extract. Like if you give it a URL, it can actually download the page and do something with it, which I do occasionally like if you're doing RAG, you could have it download information from an up-to-date documentation page or something. And that way you don't have to do all that manually. Tavily will extract it for you, for example.
Right.
This writer tool is an MCP server that reads like my newsletter or my blog. Hey, I didn't advertise my newsletter.
Yeah.
Would you mind if I bring up,
No problem. Of course.
Here's my newsletter. Comes out every Sunday. It's at kencousin.substack.com. It's called Tales from the Jar Side. I'm pasting it into the comments now. I did a psychologically disturbed song cycle in this week, but there's our Junie versus Claude code, and all of it's free. There's nothing. I'm not charging for any of this. And then I suppose I should also point out the Tales from the Jar Side YouTube channel, which is here. Let's put that in there. There we are. So I pasted that in as well, if you're interested. And that's our live stream going on right now. So we just had a level of inception here that I should probably close just so I don't get into that. The documentation for Claude Code is one giant page here. But what's interesting is if you scroll down, they have a section where they talk about, it's not the usage, what's it called? Tutorials, right. And most of these are high-level things like reading documentation, working with images. That's the one thing I didn't show you. Let me show you that. So let's say I do capture this window. I use CleanShot X, whether it's X or 10, I don't know. Capture a window, and there, I've caught that. And now I can go back over here to Claude Code, and I could say, here is a screenshot of the Claude Code documentation. And I need to do a paste, or actually, let's do a copy here. And here's the weird part. You would think it would be a Command V, just like it is on regular Mac stuff. No, it's still a Control V for some reason. And then it says image 1, and that pastes in the screenshot. The other alternative is you could bring it up in your Finder and just drag an image file over. And what it'll do is it'll translate that to a fully qualified path to that file and then read the image that way, which is, see, it did see that it got the right documentation file and it could read it and anything from that, which that one, the documentation was not good on that because I couldn't paste in, and I'm like, why can't I paste? And I watched somebody else's YouTube video and they said, oh, do a Control V and then you could paste in. Oh, okay. I had no idea. So that was in there too. Resume the previous conversation. Oh, the extended thinking. I don't know if you have the mechanism for this. What you have to do is use the word think or think hard or harder, or the one I've seen people use is ultra think. If you're asking it something really difficult and you want it to take its time, really coming up with a long answer, because otherwise it tries to come up with an answer right away. The previous conversation stuff, there's that continue flag. Let me magnify that a little bit. But there's also a resume, which supposedly allows you to pick an earlier conversation based on an ID. And I don't think I've actually found a way to do that. Like if I go, all right, exit out of here again. Like I said, I just started anyway. And if I say Claude -- resume, oh, look at that. I did, in fact, get a list, because that doesn't last that long. Maybe it's directory specific. Those are older. Wow. Hey, it looks pretty good. I'll just pick one. And there, now I've resumed at that point. Okay, I'm happy about that now. I'm glad that worked. They say run parallel Claude Code sessions with Git work trees. That sounds more complicated than it is. What it means is you open up more than one shell and just run Claude in all of them. And it says, hey, keep them isolated by using a Git work tree. See how they added two separate subdirectories and started Claude in each one. So that sounds like, oh, they're doing parallel. No. They're just saying run them in two separate directories and you'll be okay here. And I think that's one last thing, this custom / commands. This is another neat thing. You saw how all the commands use a /. You make a directory either in your root, the .claude directory, or in a given project, and put a commands folder underneath it. And then all you have to do is put a prompt. Like this prompt is analyze the performance of this code and suggest 3 specific optimizations. And they're putting it in a file called optimize.md. And then when you go /, you don't have to type project::optimize. Just put in /opt and it'll do a grep and find that command. And these are just prompts, but they're prompts that you can save, in a project or overall. And in fact, they let you put in with this $arguments command arguments as well. Find and fix issue arguments. Follow the following steps. Like one of the slash commands I'm planning to add, which I haven't gotten around to, is to say something like, whenever we add a new feature, follow the following process. Raise an issue in the repository, make a new feature branch, check, do your implementation, make sure all the tests pass, commit everything, give it a whole process to follow. And that way I won't have to say that every time. And this is how you make your own slash commands. When they say personal, they mean inside your own project. So there's the same type of folder. Here's a security review or whatever. And this way you call slash user, if you will. And I think that's another nice feature. So I think that's everything about Claude Code I wanted to make sure that people were aware of.
Exactly.
Why
Well,
don't you?
this is
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
nice list of features that Claude has, like especially the MCP
Mm.
integration and some clutches to tailor your workflow for the custom commands and everything. Junie is a little bit more like a black box in this case. Yes, we are actually working on MCP integration, and this is the most upvoted ticket that we have for Junie in UTrack. So good news, the team is looking into that. I cannot give the ETA yet when it's going to be implemented. Definitely, some of the very useful MCP servers out there, like Context 7, I'm really looking forward in getting that, especially if I want to work with new frameworks and libraries like Spring AI or the Coog framework, the agentic framework we just announced for building the agents. This is like a very exciting new development that we have. It's open
Which one is
source, and
that? I'm not familiar
I
with
can
that one. I saw the announcement from Google. Their developer framework that I think Guillaume Laforge was a big player
yeah.
in.
Yeah. So
Oh,
JetBrains Cook
right, right.
is the repository. Very interesting framework. I've been experimenting and building my own coding agent. It does tool calling. It can generate the some code and test it iteratively. And well, I'm cheating a little bit because the MCP server that I'm using is actually installed inside IntelliJ. We have the MCP plugin like among the list of plugins on the marketplace. You can just install the MCP server plugin into your IntelliJ or any other JetBrains IDE, and it will turn IntelliJ into an MCP tool, MCP server itself. So
Really?
exposing a number of features. So like Claude, if I go into the configuration, there's this server. If I connect, you will see that it has 34 different tools. It exposes the essential functions, basically working with files, running tests. It can even set the breakpoints. I haven't found a scenario yet where it would be very useful, but it's fun. Like I should experiment more. Like if something fails, will it be able to autonomously debug the process and fetch the debug information from the runtime and then fix the problem? I don't know yet. This is the theory, but it can set breakpoints, so it has the capability. What it doesn't have yet is the access to refactorings. I hope they will be added. Maybe this is something that needs to be done on the platform side. I just don't know yet. Like not just doing like text replace, but actually calling the rename refactoring instead. But even this way, you can actually start using the desktop of Claude as an agent, because it can
Uh-huh.
get access to the internal functions. It can read the test failures, for instance, and it can iterate, trying to fix the code and re-execute the tests again. So that's one option. So this is something I use for my own agent, like on my free time. So
Is that
talking
written
about
in
Junie,
is that written in Kotlin? Is that why
yeah,
it starts with a K?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's just the the tradition, probably calling all the functions or the libraries and frameworks with K. It's not always the case, but it's like pretty much the tradition that we have. So yeah, I do have, like, if someone is interested, what I'm building is I have on my own repository coding agent. You see, I'm following the tradition, like with K. That's the repository where I have a very simplistic implementation of the agent with the tools and the MCP integration for JetBrains MCP Server. So everything works automatically, and it can generate simple programs and test it. Regarding Junie, so let's talk about
Yeah,
Junie a little more.
right.
So Junie is pretty much a raw agent. It doesn't expose a lot of capabilities and features and configurations yet. Well, once we have MCP servers, you probably will have something like a configuration UI for those MCP servers, being able to connect them, configure them, and so on. Until now, we didn't have model selection. Those who are using EAP probably have seen the option to switch between 3.7 and 4.0. So we're going to have this little model selector there, but it's, again, like, it's not something that you can plug in any model by Anthropic or by any other service provider. This is not happening. So in a way, Junie is similar to Claude Code in this place. The planning feature was something that was, I don't want to say that Junie was the first to introduce it, but among the agents that I have tried, this planning feature was like the first thing that stood out for me. Like, if I was comparing the other agents to this one,
Hmm.
the other things are like mostly uh, the team is trying to um, remove the need for any manual work. Like, for instance, the compact command that you can call yourself whenever you want, or like whenever you feel is the right time to do. This is something that happens automatically on the background for Junie, so that you wouldn't run out of the context window. So the whole interaction with the agent, the way I have developed my intuition working with it, boils down to creating this development plan and explaining exactly what you need from the agent. And my way of doing it was exactly the way I was doing it right now: creating a plan, creating a technical task list, and following this task list. uh, I can be more explicit about the process as well. Like, do I want to do test driven development? This would be written in the guidelines. Besides that, we don't really have features. When people come and
Uh,
come
One
asking
thing,
me, yeah,
sorry, did you see there was a question from one of the attendees asking if it's available in Rider, JetBrains Rider yet?
yeah. So it's not there yet.
Okay.
Like, it's something that we are looking into as well. Rider is slightly different in its architecture for the plugins, and well, we know that people are waiting for that, and we are looking into that, and hopefully, well, I cannot say the ETA again. Like, I just don't know. I wish I could. Let's say this year.
I've
I
used it in PyCharm and it works great there.
Yeah, that was one of the first, like, PyCharm and IntelliJ were the first two IDs to get the plugin, and now
I
we
assume
have,
it's probably in WebStorm then. I
yeah,
don't remember what the others are.
PHP Storm,
Oh, right.
Goland, Android
Mm,
Studio,
hmm.
I
Oh, yeah, it'd have to
think,
be an Android Studio. They wouldn't like it if it wasn't. Yeah.
yeah. But a lot of the work for the team is actually integrating not just with the IDE, because IDE is kind of the same, the platform is the same, but with the tools specifically for every technology stack, so that it should know which functions to call, let's say, for PHP to validate the results, or like for any other technology stack as well. And if it's not there, of course, it can run a terminal command, but the result would be probably of a lower quality if we just do generic commands and not calling them directly. So the team is actually running a lot of evaluations on the background. So as soon as they see that the agent is producing better results with either with the tool or with some other agent, then this new work or new workflow would be incorporated into the final release. But it's a slower process than I would like it to be. Meanwhile, actually, I figured like where we failed actually with you is that, or I failed on my side. So Spring AI has a chat client. It provides a chat client from the Spring context. So all we actually needed is a tool call via MCP using the chat client. So the pipeline is pretty simplistic. If we go to the Spring AI documentation, there is a chapter on tool calling, and this is all we need. This is all we need. Like, simplified.
That tool calling is the same as the LangChain for J tool calling. It's invoking something local that is provided in a class that it has access to and all of that. Whereas that doesn't adhere to the MCP protocol, you know?
Yeah.
And we still need the translation to MCP, and that's what the MCP plugin is, the dependencies for, right?
Exactly. So this single line here would have been an MCP tool instead. I'm not sure. I haven't like learned the APIs, but here's the client.
This is the client that I wrote with Claude as a service for my server. So this is the one that does the real work. And it's got the callback provider and the service and everything in it. And there's a little application.properties file where I give it the Java command running the jar argument to I hard coded in the path to the server jar, just like that. And let me show you, I put a Java FX API, UI on it. So let me start that up. Okay, so now you can see the interface here. I mean, obviously I have work to do on the interface, but I put in a OpenAI, which is going to, when I hold down this COM button, it will record my audio and then show me the command and then put the output down here. So let me demonstrate this. Computer, run a level 1 diagnostic. Sorry, couldn't resist. Downloaded the MP3 file for that. And there it echoed, computer, run a level 1 diagnostic, and it is talking to the OS query, service through my MCP server. And there's the output with the uptime and the information and the health summary and all of that. And there you go. What I was going to add to that next, other than clean up the interface, is to make it generate a summary of this and then read that out loud, with the text-to-speech capability, because that's easy enough to do as well. But this is what I had generated with Claude Code, and here it is. This is showing the recording and then transcription and the playback and then calling the service all through here. And this, if you feel like you want to play with this is in GitHub as well. So let me give you that. So repositories, and I called it a Starfleet voice interface, dumb name, but there it is. So copy, and then I will, lost my cursor. There it is. And I'll paste that inside the chat or the comments there. So there is my voice interface with my client here. Now I got to say the MCP part of this is pretty darn simple because, as you say, it's just calling the command Java with -jar and the name of the server file, jar file. And the rest of this is figuring out how to pass the information to it. Like here's some typical commands to run, and it's just running all that in the background. And the rest of this, all this complicated stuff, is the JavaFX code. I'm not good at JavaFX, so I really did need help with that, putting all that stuff together. And the audio player, which is using JLayer to play that MP3 file, and my transcription service, which is using OpenAI to, well, first of all, this is using the audio system. This is classes from javax.sound, stuff I'd never used. This is what's capturing the microphone stuff. And then passing that to the OpenAI audio transcription model to transcribe it. So this is a lot of code, but it's really boilerplate. All this stuff, dateline.info and all that stuff.
Could you show that place where you have a prompt with the tooling setup? No. In the project.
What do you mean? I'm sorry, I missed
a few places, a few files backwards. There was this place where you have the system prompt. Yeah, here exactly. Yeah. So there is a tool callback, and the get tool callbacks method probably returns a number of tools that should be provided. Is it something that is it OpenAI or like?
No. This is the client, and that's just this is part of the Spring AI implementation. When you give it a synchronous MCP client, which is what I'm doing, it's still synchronous now. Then it will retrieve the tools that are listed as part of that client over MCP. So those are all the methods that in my service that had an @tool annotation on them.
Exactly.
So this returns all that.
This is the code this is the code, exactly the code that we wanted to get out of the agents right now, and they both failed. But well,
I was really
probably it's the problem between the keyboard and the chair on both sides.
Right.
We gotta get better with that.
Yeah. That's exactly right. This is what we needed, because I mean, all the rest of this is UI stuff and voice related stuff. And this is all I was hoping that we would get something like this as our command line. And then, okay, good. Now that's working. Let's go put a UI on it. Oh, well, I suppose if we pointed it at this project, I mean, I do have the GitHub MCP server. I could have pointed my Claude code at this project and say, here's an example of how it's supposed to be done.
That could be one option. Yeah, either.
But I mean, this code, I mean, I don't want to make it sound complicated. I got this pretty much from the Spring AI documentation, the part you were looking in on how they do MCP clients. Now they did it as a loop or something, and I changed it to a stream. But I mean, that's nothing terribly confusing. It's all about getting instantiating providing the MCP sync client, and then going from there, and then just drilling down and getting all the information out of it after that. Yeah. I don't know why it added all those extras.
Well, the reason why they have it as a loop is that you never know when the model will stop sending the tool requests. So it seemingly is that there should be one tooling call returned by the LLM, but it can do it multiple times. Like, as you know, your request might be a little bit more complicated, and in essence, it's actually an agent, right? There is a loop, there is a tooling call, and then the LLM that you use should support the tool calls. Then, in essence, you get an agent. So, like what we were trying to get here with our project today was kind of an agent.
And I didn't write this. I just realized this is part of the this is part of Spring AI. Here, where's the class name? Yeah, this class is in org.springframework.ai.mcp, just like you would figure. So they actually have code in here that says, yeah, just do what it says. And I invoked it inside you saw where I called it in the main class or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
it did all the work to get the tool callbacks. So again, I did get the code to write from the documentation on Spring AI MCP. But I didn't want to imply I wrote this part. I thought Claude did, but no, it's part of the API.
I see. I see. Well,
Yeah.
so like we gotta get our prompting skills a little better for the next time. And meanwhile, I'm happy to have you probably whenever you have time to join me again on the live streams and exercise those agents again. Maybe some other one. There is like dozens out there that we can try
Well,
and experiment more.
if we have to come up with a title, if this one was Agent Wars 2, The Wrath of Junie, then the next one's got to be Agent Wars 3, The Search for Junie, right? Or something like that,
Yeah, we could.
or Return of the Junie, something. We have
Uh,
to think about it.
we have some time to come up with the titles, and they're like if we are following the saga, the original one, how many episodes are there? Like we still have some room to explore.
Well,
All
I'm
right.
deliberately mixing metaphors here. So, I mean, the question, whenever the question is put to me of Star Wars versus Star Trek, the answer is always Babylon 5. So,
I see. All right. I gotta say thank you to all the people who stayed with us for
yes.
all the 2 hours and were coping with our failures and struggling. So with this, I think we can just end the stream and say goodbye to everybody and follow us on the social networks for the announcements that are coming afterwards, like for the upcoming streams. So thanks everybody, and thanks Ken for joining me, and see you next time.
My pleasure. Please keep in touch, everybody. Take care.